The massive transport ships hung like metal clouds against the black void of space. Inside the cramped cargo holds, 10,000 humans pressed together in silence. Most had stopped crying days ago. Now they just stared at the cold metal walls, knowing their fate was sealed. Admiral Kethvar of the Galactic Council stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, his forearms crossed behind his back. His scaled skin gleamed under the artificial lights as he watched the dead planet grow larger in the viewport. Kepler 438b looked exactly as the surveys had described. A barren rock of red dust and jagged mountains, with an atmosphere too thin to breathe and temperatures that could kill in minutes. Perfect, he whispered to himself. The humans had caused enough trouble for the galaxy. Their wars, their expansion, their refusal to follow council law. It all ended here. The Galactic Council had debated for months about what to do with humanity. Some wanted complete annihilation. Others suggested slavery. But Admiral Kethvar had proposed something more elegant. Exile to a world where they would simply fade away. Forgotten by history. "Sir, we're approaching the drop zone," reported his navigation officer. A thin creature with 6 eyes that blinked in sequence. "Begin the descent. I want every human on that surface within the hour." Below, in the cargo holds, Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the small porthole. She was a xenobiologist, one of Earth's brightest minds, and she understood exactly what the Council was doing. This wasn't just exile. It was execution with extra steps. "What do you see?" whispered Marcus Torres, a former military engineer who had become something of a leader among their group. "Death," Sarah replied simply. "The atmosphere readings show less than 8% oxygen. Surface temperature is -40 Celsius. No visible water sources." Marcus nodded grimly. Around them, families hugged each other. Children asked questions their parents couldn't answer. Everyone knew they had maybe hours to live once those doors opened. The ships landed with tremendous thuds that shook the ground for miles. Massive ramps lowered with mechanical groans, and the humans began their forced march onto the surface of their new prison. The first breath of Kepler 438b's air was like swallowing knives. Even through the basic breathing masks the Council had provided, more mockery than mercy, the cold cut through their lungs. The gravity was slightly higher than Earth's, making each step feel heavy and tired. "Form groups," Marcus shouted, his voice barely carrying in the thin air. "Families together. We need to find shelter before nightfall." Dr. Chen pulled her tablet from her pack, one of the few pieces of equipment they'd been allowed to keep. The readings were even worse than she'd feared. The atmosphere was mostly nitrogen, with trace amounts of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Solar radiation levels were dangerous, and according to her instruments, the planet's night cycle lasted 18 Earth hours. "We have maybe 6 hours of daylight left," she told Marcus as they organized the survivors. "After that, temperatures will drop to -70. Then we dig," Marcus replied. "We dig, or we die." The humans spread across the landing zone, a valley between 3 massive cliffs of red stone. Some began gathering rocks to build windbreaks. Others searched desperately for any sign of water or shelter. The children helped as best they could, their small hands already turning blue despite their gloves. Admiral Kethvar watched from his ship's bridge as the humans scattered like insects. Within a day, maybe 2, the extreme cold would finish what the thin air had started. The Galactic Council would have their peace, and humanity would be nothing but a cautionary tale. "Sir, should we depart?" asked his officer. "Not yet. I want to watch the first night. Make sure they understand their situation." But the humans were already proving more resourceful than expected. Marcus had organized teams to work on different survival tasks. One group worked to build crude shelters from rocks and the metal scraps they'd managed to salvage from their personal belongings. Another team, led by a former NASA engineer named David Kim, was attempting to create a more efficient breathing system using parts from their limited supply of oxygen masks. Dr. Chen had found something interesting, a dark opening in one of the cliff faces that might lead to a cave system. She approached it carefully, using her tablet's light to peer inside. The cave was deeper than she'd expected, and her instruments detected something that made her heart race. The air inside was slightly warmer, and there were traces of water vapor, not much, but more than the surface offered. "Marcus," she called, waving him over. "I found something." Within an hour, they had moved the entire group into the cave system. It wasn't large enough for everyone to be comfortable, but it would protect them from the worst of the night's cold. More importantly, deeper in the caves, they found ice formations. Frozen water they could melt for drinking. As the alien sun set and temperatures plummeted, the 10,000 humans huddled together in the darkness of their rocky shelter. Children cried softly while adults tried to stay awake, knowing that sleep in this cold might mean never waking up. "We need a plan," Marcus said to the small group of leaders who had emerged during the crisis. "The council expects us to die here. We need to prove them wrong." Dr. Chen nodded, her breath visible in the frigid air. "I've been studying the rock formations. This isn't just any dead planet. The mineral composition suggests this world once had an atmosphere. Maybe even life. Something changed it, but the core geology is still sound." "What does that mean for us?" asked David Kim. "It means we might be able to change it back." The idea seemed impossible. But it was hope, and hope was all they had. Throughout that first horrible night, as the temperature outside dropped low enough to freeze human blood, the survivors planned. They cataloged their skills, their resources, their knowledge. They had scientists, engineers, doctors, teachers. The council had exiled Earth's best and brightest along with everyone else. When the alien dawn finally broke, painting the red rocks in shades of orange and gold, they had lost 43 people to the cold and thin air, mostly the very old and very young, those whose bodies couldn't handle the stress. The survivors gathered around the bodies in silence, understanding that this was just the beginning, but they were still alive. 10,000 minus 43 humans still drew breath on a world meant to kill them. And they had a plan. Over the following days, the humans established routines that kept them alive. Teams ventured out during the warmest hours to gather materials and explore. They found more cave systems, some with better air circulation and larger chambers. Slowly, they began to spread out from their initial landing site. David Kim's breathing apparatus improvements allowed people to work longer on the surface. Dr. Chen's geological surveys revealed underground water sources and mineral deposits that might be useful. Marcus organized everything, turning their desperate survival into something resembling a community. They learned to read the weather patterns, to predict when the frequent dust storms would hit. They figured out which of the native plants were edible and which were poisonous. They discovered that the red dust that covered everything could be processed into a crude building material when mixed with their limited water supplies. The Galactic Council's ships had departed after 3 days, convinced they had witnessed the beginning of humanity's end. Admiral Kethvar filed his report with satisfaction. The human problem was solved. But on Kepler 438b, something else was happening. The humans weren't just surviving, they were adapting. Children who had been born in Earth's perfect environment were learning to run and play in the heavier gravity. Adults were developing more efficient ways to extract oxygen from the thin air. Everyone was becoming stronger, more resilient. 3 weeks after the exile, Dr. Chen made a discovery that changed everything. Deep in the cave systems, behind a wall of ice and stone that required explosives to breach, she found vast chambers filled with ancient machinery. The equipment was clearly alien, but not like anything in the current galactic civilization. It was older, more sophisticated. This planet wasn't always dead, she explained to the others as they explored the mysterious chambers. Something lived here before. Something advanced. And they left us tools. And one. The alien machinery was incomprehensible at first, but humanity had always been good at reverse engineering. Teams of scientists and engineers worked around the clock to understand the systems. Slowly, they began to piece together the truth. Kepler 438b had once been a garden world, with a thick atmosphere and vast oceans. Its previous inhabitants had built an extensive terraforming network, machines designed to regulate climate, atmosphere, and weather. But something had gone wrong. The system had shut down, and the planet had died. But the infrastructure is still here, David Kim reported excitedly. Buried under thousands of years of dust and ice. But intact. If we can restart it, we can bring this world back to life. Dr. Chen finished. It was ambitious beyond anything humans had ever attempted. But they had time, motivation, and 10,000 brilliant minds working together. More importantly, they had something the galaxy had never given them credit for. The ability to thrive in impossible conditions. As the months passed, the human settlement on Kepler 438b grew from desperate survival to organized civilization. They established workshops in the caves, growing food using hydroponic systems built from salvaged materials. They created communication networks between different cave systems. They even established a form of government, with Marcus as their elected leader and councils representing different skills and communities. The alien terraforming machinery became their obsession. Every day brought new discoveries, new understanding of how the ancient systems worked. They found atmospheric processors, weather controllers, even genetic banks containing the DNA of creatures that had once lived on this world. Dr. Chen spent her days in the deepest chambers, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the planet's history. The previous inhabitants had been called the Kythera, and they had been masters of biological and atmospheric engineering. Their records showed a world of crystal cities and floating gardens, with skies that sang with the voices of wind dancers and seas that glowed with bioluminescent forests. But the Kythera had made a mistake. They had tried to evolve their world too quickly, pushing the terraforming systems beyond safe limits. The atmospheric collapse had happened in a matter of decades, turning paradise into the wasteland the humans now called home. They rushed it, Dr. Chen explained to the evening council meeting. They wanted perfection immediately. But we can do it slowly, safely. We have their knowledge, but also our own patience. How long would it take, Marcus asked, to restore a breathable atmosphere? Maybe 50 years? To bring back water cycles and weather systems? Another 50 beyond that. To truly terraform this world into something like Earth? Centuries. The room fell silent. Some people would never see the results of their work. Their children might not live to walk under open skies. But their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, they would inherit a world beyond imagination. We vote, Marcus said simply. Every hand rose. The work began immediately. Using the ancient Kythera machinery as guides, human engineers started building their own atmospheric processors. They were smaller, slower, safer than the original systems, but they worked. The first test was conducted 6 months after the discovery. A single processor came online in a sealed cave system, gradually increasing the oxygen content and warming the air. Within days, they had created a small chamber where humans could breathe freely without masks. Children laughed and ran in that chamber, experiencing for the first time what it felt like to take deep, clean breaths. Adults cried openly at the sound. It was a small miracle, but it proved the concept worked. Word spread through the settlement like wildfire. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were building something new. Teams worked around the clock to construct more processors, to map optimal placement sites, to prepare for the day when they could activate the full network. But they also knew they had to be patient. The Kythera's mistake taught them that terraforming couldn't be rushed. Each system had to be tested. Each change had to be gradual. They were playing a game measured in decades, not days. As the first year of exile came to an end, the humans of Kepler 438b had transformed from refugees into pioneers. They had built a functioning civilization in the most hostile environment imaginable. They had unlocked secrets of terraforming that the current galactic civilization couldn't even comprehend. And they had done it all while the Galactic Council believed them to be long dead. The children born on Kepler 438b would grow up stronger than their parents. They would breathe thin air and call it normal. They would work in heavy gravity and think nothing of it. They would be the first generation of a new kind of human, one forged in impossible conditions and tempered by necessity. Dr. Chen often stood at the entrance to the main cave complex, looking out at the red wasteland that would someday bloom with life. She knew she might not live to see grass grow here, or hear the sound of wind through trees. But her work would make it possible. Behind her, in the chambers carved from living rock, 10,000 humans continued their impossible dream. They were building tomorrow, one breath at a time, one small miracle at a time. The galaxy thought it had solved its human problem by condemning them to a dead world. Instead, it had given humanity the greatest gift imaginable, the chance to prove that there was no such thing as impossible. Only time would tell what the Galactic Council would think when they learned what the humans had accomplished. But that was a problem for another day, another year, another generation. For now, there was work to do. 5 years had passed since the exile, and Kepler 438b was no longer the same dead world the Galactic Council had chosen for humanity's grave. The red dust still covered most of the surface, but now it was broken by patches of green. The first successful outdoor crops grown in soil that humans had created from rock dust and careful chemistry. Elena Vasquez pressed her bare hand against the bark of a tree that shouldn't exist. The modified oak stood 15 feet tall in what had once been an airless valley, its roots drawing nutrients from soil that her agricultural team had spent 3 years perfecting. Around it, wheat and corn grew in neat rows, protected by atmospheric domes that maintained Earth-normal air pressure and composition. "Mama, look!" called her 6-year-old daughter Sophia, one of the children born on this world. The little girl ran through the crops without a breathing mask, her lungs adapted to the gradually improving air quality. She had never known Earth, never breathed natural atmosphere, but to her this was paradise. Elena smiled and followed her daughter deeper into Agricultural Zone 7, one of 32 such facilities now operating across the continent. The transformation hadn't been easy or quick, but it had been steady. Every year brought new victories, new proof that humanity could turn the impossible into the inevitable. The main settlement had grown beyond the original cave system into a sprawling underground city, connected by pressurized tunnels. But more importantly, they had built upward as well. Surface domes housed manufacturing centers, research laboratories, and recreational areas where people could experience something close to normal human life. Dr. Sarah Chen, now graying at 55 but more energetic than ever, stood in the control center that monitored their terraforming progress. Holographic displays showed atmospheric composition across the planet in real time. Oxygen levels had risen from 8% to 14%. Still not breathable for extended periods, but enough for short surface work without heavy equipment. "How are the weather systems?" asked Dr. James Wilson, the climatologist who had become Chen's closest collaborator in the terraforming project. "Better than projected," Chen replied, highlighting sections of the continental map. "We've got our first self-sustaining precipitation cycle in the northern mountains. It's small, but it's raining actual water up there for the first time in thousands of years." The achievement represented years of careful work. The ancient Kythera machinery provided the foundation, but humans had improved on the original designs. Where the Kythera had tried to force rapid change, humanity took a gradual approach. They activated atmospheric processors slowly, allowing each system to stabilize before adding more complexity. The result was steady, measurable progress. Ice caps were growing at both poles. Underground aquifers were being recharged by carefully managed weather patterns. The planet's magnetic field, long dormant, was beginning to strengthen thanks to core heaters the humans had built using Kythera technology. Marcus Torres, now bearing the title of governor, though he insisted people just call him Marcus, reviewed the latest population reports. The human settlement had grown to over 11,000 people. Births had outnumbered deaths for 3 straight years. More importantly, the children born here were adapting in ways that amazed the medical teams. "They're stronger," reported Dr. Amanda Foster, the chief medical officer. "Bone density is 15% higher than Earth normal. Lung capacity is increased. Red blood cell count is optimized for the current atmospheric conditions. They're becoming something new." "Number 4. Better?" Marcus asked. "Different. Adapted. These children will thrive in environments that would challenge their Earth-born parents. When we finish terraforming this world, they'll be the perfect humans to inhabit it." The social changes were as remarkable as the physical ones. The necessity of survival had broken down many of the barriers that had existed on Earth. Skills mattered more than background. Contribution to the community was valued above personal wealth or status. Children learned from anyone willing to teach, and everyone had something valuable to share. Maya Patel, who had been a software engineer on Earth, now managed the settlement's hydroponic food production. Her husband Ahmed, formerly an architect, designed the underground living spaces that housed growing families. Their twin daughters, born on Kepler 438b, spoke 3 languages and could operate atmospheric processing equipment as easily as Earth children might ride bicycles. The human settlement had also evolved culturally in unexpected ways. Art had flourished in the underground galleries, with sculptures carved from the planet's unique crystalline rocks and paintings that captured both the harsh beauty of their current world and dreams of what it would become. Music echoed through the tunnels, sometimes Earth songs that reminded people of home, sometimes new compositions that reflected their unique experience. But perhaps most importantly, they had developed a philosophy of long-term thinking that was alien to most galactic civilizations. The humans of Kepler 438b planned in centuries, not election cycles. They made decisions based on what would be best for their great-great-grandchildren, not quarterly profits. This long-term perspective had led to innovations that impressed even their creators. The terraforming network they were building would be self-maintaining and self-improving. Unlike the Kythera system that had failed catastrophically, the human design included multiple redundancies and gradual adjustment mechanisms. "We're not just restoring this world, Doctor," Chen explained during one of her regular broadcasts to the settlement. "We're making it better than it was before. The Kythera built a paradise, but it was fragile. We're building something that will last." The broadcasts were necessary because the settlement had grown too large for everyone to gather in one place. Separate communities had been established in different regions of the continent, each specializing in different aspects of the terraforming project. The mountain communities focused on atmospheric processing, the coastal settlements worked on ocean restoration, and the desert teams perfected soil creation techniques. Communication between settlements happened through a network of quantum transmitters built from salvaged electronics and alien technology. The children used it for education, attending virtual classes taught by experts from around the planet. Adults coordinated work projects and shared resources, but it wasn't all success stories. The 5th year brought their first major crisis since the initial landing. A massive solar storm, larger than any in the planet's recorded history, struck the atmosphere with enough force to damage several key processing stations. For 6 months, atmospheric improvements stalled, while repair teams worked around the clock to restore the damaged equipment. Worse, the storm had revealed a fundamental weakness in their terraforming network. The planet's magnetic field, still developing, couldn't fully protect against such extreme solar events. If another storm hit before the magnetosphere strengthened, they could lose years of progress. "We need redundancy," Marcus declared during the emergency council session. "Not just backup systems, but completely independent networks." The solution came from an unexpected source: the children. Sofia Vasquez, now 8 years old and already showing an intuitive understanding of atmospheric systems that amazed adult engineers, suggested using the planet's extensive cave systems as natural protection for backup processors. "The storms can't reach inside the rocks," she said simply during a community meeting where even the youngest residents were encouraged to contribute ideas. Her suggestion sparked a massive engineering project. Teams began installing secondary processing networks deep underground, connected to the surface systems but protected from solar interference. The work took 2 years and required innovations in drilling, power transmission, and environmental control that pushed human engineering to new limits. But it worked. When the next major solar storm hit in year 7, the surface systems went offline as expected. But the underground network seamlessly took over. Atmospheric improvement continued without interruption. The crisis had taught them an important lesson about their new world, but it had also demonstrated something remarkable about their community. When faced with a potentially civilization-ending challenge, they had solved it not through competition or conflict, but through cooperation and creativity. The children played a larger role in community decisions than would have been possible on Earth. Their adaptation to the planet's conditions gave them insights that adult minds, trained in Earth-normal thinking, sometimes missed. A council of young people was established to provide input on major decisions, and their perspectives often proved surprisingly valuable. By year 8, the transformation of Kepler 438b had reached a tipping point. Oxygen levels hit 16%, still below Earth normal but enough for limited surface activity without breathing assistance. The first open-air sports competitions were held in pressurized surface stadiums, with games adapted for the planet's unique conditions. The weather systems had stabilized enough to support larger agricultural areas. Entire valleys now bloomed with earth crops adapted for the local conditions. Fish populations were being introduced to the growing lakes and rivers, creating the foundation for aquatic ecosystems. Most remarkably, they had begun to see signs that the planet's original ecosystem might be recoverable. The genetic archives left by the Kythera contained DNA patterns for hundreds of native species. Human scientists were beginning to experiment with bringing back the planet's original flora and fauna, carefully integrating them with Earth life to create hybrid ecosystems. "We're not just terraforming," Dr. Chen observed during a scientific conference broadcast across all settlements. "We're creating something entirely new. A world that combines the best of Earth life with the beauty of what came before." The first successful revival of a Kythera species came in year 9. It was a flowering plant that had once covered the planet's grasslands in carpets of blue and silver. When the first restored meadow bloomed, people traveled from across the continent to see it. Many wept at the beauty of colors that hadn't existed on this world for millennia. But the humans weren't just restoring the past, they were improving it. The new ecosystems they designed were more resilient than either Earth or Kythera biospheres had been alone. Plants that could survive in variable atmospheric conditions, animals that could adapt to changing climates, water cycles that could recover from disruption. The children born in year 5 were now old enough to contribute meaningfully to the terraforming work. They brought perspectives that amazed their parents, suggestions for ecosystem interactions that Earth-trained minds wouldn't have considered, innovations in atmospheric management that only people raised in transitional environments could envision. Elena Vasquez watched her daughter Sofia, now 13 and leading a team of young atmospheric technicians, make adjustments to a processing station with the confidence of someone who had never known any other life. These children weren't just adapted to Kepler 438b, they were its first true native inhabitants. The human population had grown to nearly 15,000, with new births consistently outnumbering deaths. But they had also become something more than just survivors. They were the inheritors and creators of an entirely new world. As year 10 approached, long-range sensors detected something that changed everything. Ships were approaching the system. Galactic Council vessels on what appeared to be a routine inspection mission. After a decade of believing the humans dead, the galaxy was coming to check on their handiwork. The news spread through the settlements like wildfire. Some people panicked, fearing that their new life would be destroyed. Others were angry, ready to fight for the world they had built. But most, surprisingly, were curious. What would the Galactic Council think when they discovered what humanity had accomplished? Marcus called for calm as emergency councils convened across the planet. They had perhaps 6 months before the council ships arrived. Enough time to prepare, but not to hide what they had achieved. "We have a choice," Marcus announced during a planet-wide broadcast. "We can try to conceal our progress and hope they leave us alone, or we can show them what we've accomplished and dare them to do something about it." The vote was unanimous across all settlements. They would show the galaxy what exile had created. They would demonstrate that humanity didn't just survive impossible odds. They thrived in them. Dr. Chen began preparing presentations that would showcase their terraforming achievements. Engineers worked to make their most impressive installations ready for visitors. Artists created displays that would tell the story of their transformation from exiles to pioneers. But most importantly, they prepared to defend their new home. Not with weapons, they had none that could challenge Council warships, but with something more powerful. They would show the galaxy that the dead world of Kepler 438b had become humanity's greatest achievement. The children, now young adults who had never known any other home, volunteered to be the first ambassadors. They would greet the Council representatives not as supplicants or refugees, but as the natives of a world they had helped create. Sofia Vasquez, approaching her 14th birthday, stood in the observation dome overlooking Agricultural Zone 7. The valley below was green, with earth crops, and blue with restored Kythera flowering meadows. In the distance, atmospheric processors worked quietly to continue the slow transformation of the sky. "Are you worried about the ships?" Elena asked her daughter. Sophia considered the question seriously, as the children of Kepler 438b always did. Finally, she shook her head. "They exiled us here to die. Instead, we made paradise. What's the worst they can do? Exile us again?" Elena smiled. Her daughter had never known defeat because she had been raised in a community that turned every obstacle into an opportunity. The approaching council ships weren't a threat to these children. They were just another problem to solve. As the Galactic Council vessels drew closer, the humans of Kepler 438b continued their work. They had spent 10 years proving that there was no such thing as impossible. Now they would find out what the galaxy thought of their achievement. Admiral Kethvar stood frozen on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the sensor readings that made no sense. His scaled hands gripped the command console as he tried to process what his instruments were telling him about the world below. "Sir, these readings must be malfunctioned," reported his navigation officer, all 6 eyes blinking rapidly in confusion. "The planetary atmosphere shows 14.7% oxygen. Surface temperature readings indicate liquid water, and there are." The Admiral's forearms trembled slightly. He had come to Kepler 438b to conduct a routine inspection of the human dumping ground, expecting to find nothing but bones and silence. Instead, his long-range scanners detected signs of industrial activity, organized settlements, and what appeared to be large-scale atmospheric manipulation. "Are you certain these are the correct coordinates?" he demanded. "Yes, sir. This is definitely the planet where we deposited the human exiles 10 years ago." Kethvar felt his stomach twist. The Galactic Council had celebrated the elegant solution to the human problem. Clean, efficient, final. No messy extermination to trouble the conscience. Just exile to a dead world where nature would take its course. The Admiral had built his reputation on that success. But now, take us into orbit. Full scanning array. I want to know everything about this planet's current status. As the Council fleet descended toward Kepler 438b, the true scope of the transformation became clear. What had been a barren red wasteland was now spotted with green. Artificial lakes reflected sunlight. Weather patterns showed organized precipitation cycles. And across the largest continent, a network of installations pumped carefully managed atmospheres into the sky. On the planet's surface, Marcus Torres received the orbital approach alerts with calm satisfaction. At 63, the former engineer had become something he never expected, the leader of an entire world. His hair was white now, lined face marked by years of hard work and harder decisions, but his eyes were bright with the confidence of someone who had achieved the impossible. "They're here," he announced to the assembled council in the main settlement's conference chamber. 3 council cruisers, standard inspection formation. They'll be in communication range within the hour. Dr. Sarah Chen, now in her 60s but still sharp as ever, reviewed the presentation materials one final time. The atmospheric data will shock them. The biodiversity indices will confuse them. But the population numbers, those will terrify them. The human population of Kepler 438b had reached 22,000. Not through immigration. No ships had visited this system in a decade, but through birth and survival. Children raised in harsh conditions had grown into adults stronger and more capable than their Earth-born parents. The second generation, those born on this world, were something entirely new. Sofia Vasquez, now 24, and serving as the settlement's chief atmospheric engineer, made final adjustments to the presentation displays. She had volunteered to be the primary spokesperson for the younger generation, the ones who called this harsh world home and knew no other. "Remember," Marcus addressed the council, "we're not asking for permission. We're not begging for mercy. We're informing them of what we've accomplished and what we plan to continue doing. They can either accept it or explain to the galaxy why they want to destroy the greatest terraforming achievement in recorded history." The first communication request came as expected. Admiral Kethvar's image appeared on the main display. his scaled features twisted in confusion and barely controlled anger. "This is Admiral Keth Var of the Galactic Council Inspection Fleet to whatever authority claims jurisdiction over this planet. Request immediate explanation for unauthorized terraforming activities in violation of Council Decree 2847. Marcus stepped forward, flanked by Sophia and Dr. Chen. Behind them, holographic displays showed the planet's transformation over 10 years. Atmospheric improvements, ecosystem restoration, population growth, technological advancement. "Admiral Keth Var," Marcus said with formal politeness. "I'm Governor Marcus Torres of the Kepler 438b Colonial Administration. We welcome you to our world. As for unauthorized terraforming activities, I'm afraid you'll need to be more specific. We haven't violated any laws we're aware of." "Load." The Admiral's forearms spread in a gesture of barely controlled rage. "You were exiled here to die. This planet was chosen specifically because it couldn't support human life. How dare you? How dare we survive?" Sophia interrupted, stepping forward with the fearless confidence of someone who had never lived anywhere else. "How dare we thrive? How dare we turn your intended graveyard into our home?" "I'm Sevendin." Dr. Chen activated the main display, showing detailed atmospheric readings, population statistics, and ecosystem data. "Admiral, perhaps you'd like to review what we've accomplished during our exile. We think you'll find the results interesting." The data spoke for itself. Oxygen levels had risen from 8% to nearly 17%. Atmospheric pressure had increased by 40%. Surface temperatures had stabilized in ranges suitable for human activity. Most shocking of all, the planet now supported complex ecosystems that included both Earth and native species. "This is impossible," the Admiral whispered, scanning the readouts. "Our scientists assured us that this world was permanently dead. The atmospheric composition, the solar radiation, the climate instability. Your scientists were half right," Dr. Chen replied. "The world was dead. But dead things can be brought back to life if you understand the science involved. We found extensive terraforming infrastructure left by the previous inhabitants. We studied it, improved it, and put it back to work." Marcus gestured to the displays showing their settlements. "We currently have 47 major population centers across 3 continents. Our industrial capacity includes atmospheric processing, advanced agriculture, materials manufacturing, and biotechnology research. We're completely self-sufficient and continuing to expand." The Admiral stared at the numbers in disbelief. 22,000 humans where there should have been only bones. A functioning civilization where there should have been empty wasteland. A thriving world where the Council had intended to create a monument to the futility of defying galactic law. "This changes nothing," Keth Var said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. "You're still exiles. This is still a penal colony. The Council will decide what to do with your unauthorized developments." Sophia laughed, a sound full of joy and complete lack of fear. "Admiral, with respect, you're 10 years too late to stop anything. Look around you. We've built a world. We've raised children who know no other home. We've created something beautiful from what you intended to be our grave. What exactly do you think the Council can do about it now?" The question hung in the air while the Admiral struggled for an answer. The truth was that the Council's options were extremely limited. They could try to destroy the settlements, but that would mean exterminating 22,000 people who had committed no crime except surviving where they were supposed to die. The galactic community, despite its many flaws, generally frowned on genocide. They could try to relocate the humans again, but to where? And why would any civilization want to deal with a species that had proven capable of terraforming dead worlds in a single generation? "We request permission to send an inspection team to verify these claims," the Admiral said stiffly. "Granted," Marcus replied. "We'd be happy to give you a full tour. But I should warn you, our weather control systems are still being calibrated. We're expecting some spectacular aurora displays tonight as we test our improved magnetosphere generators." As the first Council shuttle descended toward the main settlement, word spread through the human communities across the planet. People gathered to watch the landing, curious about their first alien visitors in a decade. Children who had been born on Kepler 438b stared up at the sky with wonder, seeing for the first time the species that had tried to kill their parents. The landing site chosen was Agricultural Zone 7, the same valley where Elena Vasquez had watched her daughter play among impossible crops years earlier. Now it was a showcase of human achievement. Vast fields of earth grains growing beside restored Kythera flowering meadows, all under a sky that grew more blue each year. Admiral Kethvar stepped off his shuttle into air that his instruments said should have killed him instantly. Instead, he found himself breathing easily, surrounded by the sounds of running water, growing plants, and human laughter. The red dust that should have covered everything was held down by grass and flowers. "Welcome to New Eden," Sophia said, using the informal name the children had given to their world. Population Center, 7 of 47. Established in year 3 of our colonial period. Current population just over 400, specializing in agricultural development and ecosystem integration. The Admiral barely heard her words. He was staring at children playing in a field of grain that shouldn't exist, breathing air that should have been toxic, under a sky that should have been empty of all but the hardest radiation. Everything he thought he knew about planetary science was being challenged by what his own eyes were seeing. "The atmospheric processors," he managed to say. "Where are they?" Dr. Chen pointed to a series of structures that looked more like art installations than industrial equipment. "We learned from the mistakes of the previous inhabitants. Instead of massive, centralized processors that could fail catastrophically, we built distributed networks of smaller units. They're integrated into the landscape and designed to work with natural systems rather than against them." A group of human children approached the alien visitors with the fearless curiosity of people who had never known anything but security and abundance. One little boy, maybe 6 years old, offered Admiral Kethvar a flower that bloomed in shades of blue and silver. "It's a memory bloom," the child explained solemnly. "They remember everything that happened on this planet. The sad times and the happy times. My teacher says they help the world remember how to be beautiful." Kethvar took the flower with numb fingers. The plant was clearly Kythera in origin, but it had been modified with Earth genetics to create something entirely new. The petals felt real, smelled sweet, and according to his scanner, was producing oxygen at a rate that should have been impossible. "How many species have you restored?" he asked Dr. Chen. 43 Kythera species and rising. We've also introduced about 60 Earth species and created 18 hybrid varieties that combine the best traits of both biospheres. The ecosystem integration protocols are working better than we dared hope." As they toured the settlement, the Admiral saw wonders that challenged everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about terraforming. Humans had achieved in 10 years what most civilizations couldn't accomplish in centuries. More importantly, they had done it sustainably, creating systems that improved themselves over time, rather than degrading. The residential areas were built into hillsides and growing with living walls that purified air and provided food. The manufacturing centers used closed-loop systems that produced no waste. The power grid was based on fusion reactors that had been built from scraps and alien technology, but most impressive of all were the people. The humans of Kepler 438b moved with confidence and purpose. They worked together with an efficiency born of shared hardship and common goals. They treated their harsh world with respect and love, seeing beauty where others saw only obstacles. "This is Administrator Elena Vasquez," Sophia said, introducing a middle-aged woman whose eyes held depths of experience that couldn't be faked. "She oversees agricultural development for the northern continent." Elena smiled and shook the Admiral's hand with the easy confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. "Welcome to our world, Admiral. I hope you'll get a chance to see some of our other settlements. Each one has developed its own specialties and innovations." "How many more settlements are there?" Kethvar asked. "Currently 47 major population centers and maybe twice that in smaller outposts and research stations. We've got communities working on oceanic restoration, mountain atmospheric processing, desert reclamation, and polar ice cap stabilization. Every region of the planet has its own challenges and opportunities." The Admiral felt overwhelmed. He had come here expecting to find evidence of illegal terraforming that he could report to the Council as a minor violation. Instead, he was discovering what amounted to the most successful colonial effort in galactic history. "What do you want?" he asked Marcus during a private moment. "What's your endgame here? The Council will never just let this stand." Marcus considered the question carefully. "We want to be left alone to continue building our world. We want our children to grow up free and safe. We want to show the galaxy that terraforming can be done right, sustainably, beautifully, and maybe, someday, we want other species to learn from what we've accomplished here." "You're talking about changing everything," Kethvar said. "The entire balance of power in the galaxy is based on the idea that only certain species can successfully terraform worlds. If humans can do this," Sophia interrupted, "then maybe the galaxy needs to reconsider some of its assumptions about which species deserve to survive and which don't." The statement hung in the air between them. The Admiral understood the implications perfectly. Humanity had been exiled as dangerous and uncontrollable. Now they had proven capable of achievements that surpassed most galactic civilizations. The Council could no longer dismiss them as primitive troublemakers. That evening, the humans hosted a celebration in honor of their visitors. The entire settlement gathered in an outdoor amphitheater that had been carved into a hillside and covered with flowering vines. As the alien sun set, the aurora displays that Marcus had promised lit up the sky in sheets of green and gold. Children born on this world performed songs they had composed about their home. Adults shared stories of the early days, the struggles and victories that had brought them to this moment. Everyone contributed food to a feast that showcased both Earth crops and restored Kythera delicacies. Admiral Kethvar found himself seated next to a 12-year-old girl named Anna, one of the second generation who had never known any world but this one. She chatted easily about her studies in atmospheric engineering and ecosystem design, displaying knowledge that would have impressed graduate students on most civilized worlds. "Do you like our planet?" she asked him during a pause in the conversation. The Admiral looked around at the celebration, at the thriving community gathered under alien stars, at the proof that life could flourish anywhere if given enough determination and ingenuity. "It's remarkable," he said honestly. 10 years ago, this world was dead. Now it's becoming something beautiful. "A vase," Anna smiled. "My parents say it was never really dead, just sleeping. We just helped it wake up." As the celebration continued into the night, the Admiral found himself documenting everything with his personal recorder. The Council would need to see all of this, would need to understand what humanity had accomplished, but he was beginning to suspect that no amount of documentation could prepare them for the reality. The next day brought tours of other settlements, each revealing new innovations and achievements. The mountain communities had developed atmospheric processors that worked in extreme conditions. The coastal settlements had successfully restored marine ecosystems and were experimenting with aquaculture that could feed entire populations. Most impressive were the children. Everywhere the Admiral went, he encountered young humans who spoke casually about planetary engineering, ecosystem management, and atmospheric chemistry as if they were discussing the weather. They had been raised on a world where impossible things happened every day through hard work and clever thinking. "They're not quite human anymore, Doctor," Chen observed during a quiet moment. "Oh, they're genetically human, but they've adapted in ways that go beyond the physical. They think differently, solve problems differently, see possibilities where others see only obstacles." "What have you created here?" the Admiral asked. "The future," Chen replied simply. "Not just for this world, but potentially for the entire galaxy. These children will grow up to terraform dead worlds, restore damaged ecosystems, build sustainable civilizations in impossible places. They're living proof that species can evolve beyond their origins if given the right challenges and opportunities." On the final day of his inspection, Admiral Kethvar requested a private meeting with the human leadership. They gathered in the main settlement's council chamber, surrounded by displays showing the planet's continued transformation. "I have to ask," he said quietly, "are you planning to seek revenge against the Council? Against the species that exiled you here?" Marcus exchanged glances with Dr. Chen and Sophia before answering. Admiral, revenge would require us to care about the past more than the future. We're too busy building tomorrow to waste time on yesterday's grudges. But you do understand that your success here changes everything? The Council based its decision to exile humanity on the assumption that you would die quietly and be forgotten. Instead, you've created something that challenges the fundamental assumptions about terraforming, colonial expansion, and species survival. Sophia leaned forward. Admiral, we understand that our existence is inconvenient for some people. But we're not going to apologize for surviving. We're not going to hide what we've accomplished. And we're not going to stop building our world just because it makes others uncomfortable. What we want, Dr. Chen added, is recognition. Not as exiles or refugees, but as the legitimate government of a sovereign world. We want trade relationships, cultural exchanges, and peaceful coexistence with our galactic neighbors. And if the Council refuses, Marcus smiled, then we'll continue building our world and raising our children and proving that exile was the best thing that ever happened to humanity. With or without Council approval. The Admiral understood the implicit message. Humanity was no longer the struggling species that had been exiled a decade ago. They had become something more capable, more determined, and potentially more dangerous than anyone had imagined. They weren't asking for permission to exist. They were informing the galaxy that they intended to thrive. As the Council ships prepared to depart, Sophia stood in the observation dome overlooking Agricultural Zone 7. The valley was green with growing crops and blue with restored native flowers. In the distance, atmospheric processors worked quietly to continue the gradual transformation of the sky. She had been born into exile, but had never felt exiled. This harsh world was home. Its thin air was normal. Its red dust was beautiful. She and her generation would inherit a paradise that their parents had built from nothing, and they would continue building it for their own children. The Council ships lifted off and disappeared into the alien sky, carrying news that would shake the foundations of galactic politics. Humanity had not just survived their intended extinction, they had thrived beyond anyone's wildest expectations. As evening approached, Sophia walked through the settlement where she had grown up. Children played in gardens that shouldn't exist. Adults worked on projects that advanced the impossible dream of a restored world, and somewhere in the laboratories, scientists continued unlocking the secrets that would make their paradise even more beautiful. The galaxy had tried to end humanity by exiling them to a dead world. Instead, they had created something unprecedented. A species that could bring dead worlds back to life. The implications would ripple through galactic civilization for generations to come. But that was tomorrow's challenge. Tonight, under alien stars that shone through an atmosphere that grew more Earth-like every year, the children of Kepler 438b planned their next impossible achievement. After all, they had learned from their parents that there was no such thing as impossible, only problems that hadn't been solved yet.